It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Sam Starbrook from London, UK, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be chatting with Jack, who comes to us from Pennsylvania. And he had an encounter when he was very young. And Jack has a fascinating take on this whole subject because he spent so much time in the scientific world. It's kind of fascinating to talk to a guy like this and get his take on this whole Bigfoot subject. We'll also be chatting with Will, and William comes to us from Canada. He had an encounter a couple of years ago, actually, where he got a pretty good look at this creature. And Will's going to be sharing that with us tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Jack to the show. Jack, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. And I know your encounter took place in Pennsylvania. How many years ago did this happen, Jack?
So it was in the summer of 1982, so quite a while now.
Yeah, definitely still stays with you, though, doesn't it?
It does. It makes an impression on you for a lifetime, I think.
No doubt. Well, if you would take us back to that moment, kind of tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened.
So it was, it was a nice summer's day. It was July. I remember that. I don't remember exactly what day it was, but I know I was 9 years old at the time. And, like a lot of kids in the early 80s, just out kind of tooling around, playing outside. I lived at the time in a very rural area, so there weren't a lot of neighborhood kids to hang out with. But it was, it was a good place to grow up. Lots of farmland, lots of forest. And I can remember that I had gotten a 10-speed bike. Free Spirit was the brand from Sears, Roebuck and Company earlier that year. And it was kind of funny because, a 10-speed bike isn't, something that actually is very functional out in a very hilly, mountainous area where there's not a lot of good places to ride, but it was still fun. And so I remember that I was kind of riding it around in my driveway and yard area, and I decided to go just up the road just a wee bit. There's a cemetery that is diagonal from the property that I grew up on, and it's across the road, and it was a macadam road, so I rode up the macadam road, and invariably with this particular bike, as much as I loved it, the chain was always coming off. So you would switch gears and it would just pop off, and you'd have to stop and reset the chain and do all that kind of good stuff. So it was funny because at the time, it happened right in front of the cemetery as I was going by, and I stopped, and there was a pull off, not a formal parking lot for the cemetery, but it was a good little dirt pull off. And then you had the cemetery gate, and of course all the headstones and such. And the cemetery was surrounded by a stone wall. It's a farming area, so it was natural to see a lot of stone walls around. And so I started working on my bike, and for a moment, when I look back now, it feels like a bad B horror movie. That the chain fell off at that moment because I was fixing it, and then I just kind of felt, I want to say that I felt like I was being watched, but I felt like I was not alone. So I just stood up and I was looking around, and I noticed at the back of the cemetery, which the length of the cemetery, I would say, Wes, was a good, I've paced it. It's a good 110 yards maybe in length and maybe 40 yards wide. So I noticed like a figure at the back of the cemetery, and it was very strange because I didn't know what I was looking at, and it wasn't that at the time I was unaware of Sasquatch as a kid. A lot of kids growing up in the 70s and 80s were familiar with it, but I think my impression was more that it was more like a kind of like a cranky Chewbacca type character between 7 and 8 feet tall, and that's not exactly what I saw. What I saw was very black. Like, I can remember it looked like a coat on, and the coat was jet black. It was a little shiny, but not super glossy or anything. But you could tell it was thick and clean. And the figure that I was looking at was between 9 and 10 feet tall. And the reason I know that is that it was standing next to a maple sapling, which I went back and looked at, which was a good maybe 8 feet tall. And this was a good 2 feet above that. It was standing next to it. I couldn't see any feet or hands, as it was actually on the outside of the stone wall at the back of the cemetery. So if you can imagine, I was looking through the cemetery to the back at this figure, and it's was right behind the stone wall. But what was strange about it was almost rectangular in shape, like a vertical rectangle, and it had like a very small, from what I could see, bump for a head. And I didn't quite understand that at the time. I think looking back at it more, and listening to other people's encounters, that the trapezius muscles on these things can be extremely developed and may make the head look a little bit scrunched down. And that's basically what I saw. It was very black. It was the way the sun was angled. It made it very difficult to really distinguish a face necessarily, but I could, as a kid, I had an impression that I was being watched, almost like your neighborhood dog might watch you as you pedal by his house. And I stood there and I looked at it for quite some time, and I was just amazed by the size of it, the way it just seemed to absorb the sunlight, and it was motionless. I smelled nothing. I heard nothing, but it was definitely there, and it was staring at me. And of course, I immediately, I didn't feel like this was a good place for me to be. So I grabbed that Free Spirit bike, and I didn't even bother with the chain anymore, man. And I took off down the road running. It's funny because, I didn't see it come or go, but a day or two later, I ventured back to look, and there was nothing there. So it wasn't that I had mistaken a freestanding object like a stump or a tree that had been lopped off by lightning or something like that. There had been something large, black, humanoid looking, with dark black fur, standing there staring at me. So after listening to many of your callers, I feel like I really got off very lucky. And I just wanted to share that because listening to other people's stories have definitely helped me over the last few years, just coming to terms with what I saw and what I am pretty sure was a bona fide encounter.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing it. It's so bizarre. I was talking about this on Friday night show for the members because there's a few encounters like this when people were kids, how they'll just kind of sit and watch you. And it's weird, man. With kids, for whatever reason, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, they just kind of sit and watch. They don't really, not a ton of aggression, not really, and that's not to say that doesn't happen, but I'm saying generally speaking, most people who recount encounters like you, who are adults now, but when they were kids, they were talking about seeing this thing and how it just kind of stood there motionless. Did you tell anyone about your encounter? I mean, did you go home and tell your folks?
Well, I waited. I waited about 3 days, and I did tell my mother, and I remember it very distinctly. She just looked at me, and very patiently and quietly, with the Jedi mind tricks of a mother, said, "You saw a bear." And I wanted to believe her in the worst way. I'm like, "Yeah, I saw a bear," but I didn't see a bear. Kind of like the title of one of your episodes, that was no damn bear. I'm in complete agreement with that. So I did. And, I think I eventually told some friends, and, you get the ridicule and the, laughing, and, people still give me, Bigfoot paraphernalia as a joke, even as an adult over 30 years later. And, I take in stride, what are you going to do? But I think there just isn't an appetite for most people that in everyday life unless they've really looked into this phenomenon, to accept that it's a real possibility. So, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Did it affect you at all as far as wanting to go out there, or was it just kind of a weird experience that you've let go?
Oh, no. Yeah, no, it made me very nervous about being out and about, for sure. I think after that, you're just a bit more circumspect. And I have, even, as recently as a couple of years ago in that area, heard strange wood knocks and wood cracks, and wondered, I wonder if, there is a population that moves through or lives permanently in the area. But I do pay attention to my instincts, when I'm out in the woods. And, not that I'm a hunter, but I like to take my dogs out and walk, or I also own property near there. And, I certainly, I don't want to say patrol, but I like to make, know what's going on my acreage. And, I always there are days, I'll be honest, when I go out and I feel, something doesn't feel right. I think I'm just going to go home and not push it. And then other days it feels like nothing out of the ordinary would ever happen. So I would be, not forthcoming if I didn't say that it didn't affect me. It definitely did. And I mean, that's why I'm, kind of here on the show today, just expressing that, this did happen, and it's, it can, I think, happen to a lot of people, and they don't have a way to necessarily deal with it other than, talking about it. But it definitely changed the way I think about the woods and what may be in there.
After all these years after this encounter, and kind of, I would imagine it's been on your mind over the years. Have you thought about what these creatures are and kind of what you've concluded? Obviously, there's no wrong answer to that question. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I'm a scientist by training. I have a background in evolutionary biology, so I think originally I thought, okay, I'll tell you this. There's what I hope that it is, and there's what I hope that it is not. What I hope that it is, just from, my pure scientific training, in biological science is that it's a relic hominid, that it's some offshoot of the group of primates that led to Homo sapiens and some of the other groups that we know have been present throughout the fossil record, and that they're some type of leftover vestige of that era right before our species became the dominant one on the planet. That's what I hope that it is, and that it's got a high degree of intelligence and has been able to remain hidden. And that's kind of the scientific, that's the I sleep well at night kind of
Yeah.
element,
Yeah.
But then I got to be honest. I mean, I have looked into this phenomenon for a couple of years. I've even gone to some of the I don't want to call them conventions or meetings. I've met Jeff Meldrum. I've looked at CAST. So I don't deny that it's out there, but listening to your show and then listening, and doing a lot of reading about just ordinary encounters and observations that people make. There's just this body of evidence just based on people's experience that seems to align, right? Like if people were making this up, right? If this was a figment of people's fantasy, there'd be a high degree of variation, right? The stories you would think would be all over the board, but there's just so many consistencies in things that don't necessarily make sense. And one of those things, of course, is the debate between the eye shine or the glowing eyes. And it's not that there are examples of nature with creatures. They tend to be more microscopic and smaller that have bioluminescent capabilities, but we have to think that, okay, maybe that is a possibility with these creatures. And the more I hear the stories, and there were a couple that just really made me stop and think. And one of them was the story that one of your listeners contributed, where I think he had encountered some smaller creatures in the forest, and then came back and met this woman who had them in her house, right? I mean, I remember that very vividly. I've listened to that story a couple of times, and I thought, well, just on face value, you might laugh at that, right? And think, oh boy, this is just crazy. But there was another instance where that was actually, I think it was on Coast to Coast a number of years ago, about a woman from Tacoma who called in, who claimed to have spent some time with these creatures, and relayed this story that they are not of this planet originally. And these elements do pop up from time to time, and I think a number of years ago I might have laughed at such a thing, but I can't, as a scientist, deny that people's empirical experiences aren't valid, right? And I think because of that, I have to be open to a second possibility that these animals may or may not, or creatures may not necessarily be of this world. And when I say that, I mean, we live in such a gigantic universe, and I think even mathematically, the probability of us being alone is really not. It's just not tenable. It's not a real possibility. There's just too much. Even if you do the math on the number of planets and the probabilities of life forming, I mean, it's just the numbers add up to the astronomical possibility that we are not alone, right? And so I often think about what we do as human beings with animals that you find in zoos and different types of scientific settings, where we experiment with animals, and we mess with their genetic code. We do testing. We tag. We track. We re-release. We observe. And I think there may be an element of that at work. I mean, that is, to me, a possibility that has to be at least recognized. I know we have no way of proving that at this point, at least to the satisfaction of the scientific community or the greater public at large. But I think like John Bindernagel used to say on your show, is the society ready for the evidence? And I think that may be a case here where, at least empirically, we're hearing stories from people that indicate that there is a link here between, extraterrestrial activity and some of these creatures. Now, have I experienced that personally? No, but I have to be open to it, as a scientist and someone who's seen something that isn't supposed to exist. So I guess that's a very long answer to your question, but
no, it's a great answer. It's a great
it
answer.
kind of, for me, it comes down to those two options. And I'll be honest, I used to think the first one was, much more probable, but I think the second one is much more uncomfortable because it raises all kinds of questions, not only about these creatures, but if you look at Melba Ketchum's work, which I've read, her genetic reports are in line with a report that I would write in a lab. And I have to say that, that was kind of an eye opener. Like, okay, what if she actually does have genetic material from these creatures and they are related to us? If what does that say about us? So I think some of these questions also may tie into why the government may have such a vested interest in keeping this very quiet and in the realm of the preposterous, because I've heard people on your show discuss that, that, okay, the spotted owl is kind of the test case, right, for the forestry industry. But there has to be something else here that's much larger than the forestry industry for a government or organization to want to keep a lid on a supposed, relic primate that's running around in the forests of North America and Asia and Australia. And so it really does makes you ask the question, well, if we learn the truth, what's so bad about it? I mean, it would have to be on the magnitude of something that, disturbs the economy of the planet. Not that like the coronavirus hasn't, but it's something of similar magnitude. It would have to destabilize institutions like religion or economics and if you think about some of these ideas that you start pulling on the thread and it unravels, like, holy cow, if we're not alone and there's been visitation and experimentation, I mean, that is going to upset a lot of human institutions that basically, control the ebb and flow of our world, whether it's economic or religious or, even scientific. So I think it's a fascinating topic, and that you're making a great contribution. And unfortunately, there just seems to be more questions than answers. But
yeah, no doubt.
I obviously have had it on my mind for a while, and just tried to take a thoughtful approach and try to be reasonable and not jump to conclusions. But like I said, there's, I don't deny people's experiences and eyewitness accounts, because not everyone is, paranoid schizophrenic. Not everyone is a liar. And even if you took a small proportion of these cases and gave them credibility, then you still would have a whole set of questions that I think are very uncomfortable for us to address.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you said it better than I could have. You're an educated man. I'm a caveman. But you're right. I mean,
no, you're not.
I love, what you want it to be. I'm with you 100%. I would love for it to be that. But I got about 30 follow-up questions that might tear apart that theory. And again, I could be wrong. But I mean, I got about 30 follow-up questions that most people don't like to hear. Most people don't want to hear. The second theory is fascinating, and it makes more sense why the government would cover it up. I've been saying that for years, that the whole spotted owl and the forestry department, and on and on and on, that makes no sense. To me, that makes no sense. I mean, really, you hear a lot of bizarre accounts. Is it people who are delusional? I don't think so. I used to think people who saw the eye shine you brought up, well, they're mistaking that. They're saying their eyes are glowing, but I mean, I can drive down the road, a deer could cross the road, look in my headlights, and it looks like his eyes are glowing, but it's eye shine. Until I started talking to a bunch of hunters, and the hunters would tell me, no, it's not eye shine. Those eyes were glowing. Yeah. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so many follow-up questions to what this thing is. And it would make more sense, option B, what you don't want it to be, why there would be such a weird cover-up on this subject. I mean, if it was a monkey running around the woods, I don't see the government going to the extent that they are to make everyone hush up about what's going on. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
just don't. It
exactly.
makes no sense. It. Let
No, it
me.
doesn't.
Can I
It
can I
doesn't
ask
make
you real
sense.
quick about Melba's paper? Well, kind of
Hmm.
your take on it, because I'm not. I mean, I'm not on her level and I've always wanted to have her on the show. I'd love to talk to her about it and just get her take on the paper. What was kind of your gut feeling reading that paper? What she wrote about the whole
Yeah, I read
genome.
it several years ago, and I remember my impression was, oh my gosh, this is something that would come out of, the labs I trained in. Um, and what surprised me was the degree of alignment in, I think it was in the mitochondrial DNA, which is the DNA that we use that's passed down maternally. And I think that the science she did seems spot on. I mean, I couldn't, without being there, I couldn't spot any inconsistencies as far as I knew in her approach. And she just was reporting out what she found. And I believe the gist was that, she found this variation in the maternal lineage through the mitochondrial DNA, and there was a divergence 15,000 years ago is what sticks in my head. But the other thing I think was that the nuclear DNA was not as closely aligned with the human nuclear DNA that you would expect. So, I mean, and I think part of I don't want to say controversy, but the grief she has received is that there probably was an expectation that any bona fide genetic work that was done, like from multiple samples from different parts of the continent, would yield a unique genetic fingerprint. And the fact that it was so closely related to, everyday human DNA upset a lot of people. But I mean, as far as the science, I was actually impressed with the paper, and I thought I don't know why people are so upset. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's like you say in science, the data is what the data is. It just, it's how we interpret it, and it's how we construe what it means, which is where it gets sticky. But I mean, it was extraordinarily brave of her to do that, because it's clearly could be a career killer, where people become a laughing stock, which is very unfortunate and I think very misguided. But at the same time, I actually think if the data had revealed a fingerprint that looked like what we expect, right, like that first option, like what we want it to be, I don't think the blowback would have been as hard. But I think it's very unfortunate because, it's fairly straightforward right now, the science, when we look at comparing, what we have in our genetic databases and the techniques that are used to compare DNA, because that's really what we're doing. I mean, the technology and the techniques are sophisticated, but the concept isn't. I mean, you're basically matching up one code with another. And it's the degree of closeness in those codes that tell you the relative distance that one species is from another. And the fact that she came so close to, human DNA is I think what disturbed people. And it also gives people a chance to say, oh, it must be contaminated. But, if her lab is, anything like most university labs, then she's probably had put in, controls for contamination, right? Like done a contaminated set just to see what it looked like if it was the same, and that would tell her, oh geez, we did contaminate this. We have to either rerun the samples or get new ones. So I think that she's been treated unfairly, Wes. But often if you look back at the history of science, it's full of people, who are treated unfairly for bringing forth data and observations that were unpopular and uncomfortable at the time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up. I'm glad to have you look at it, being, a scientist and having a scientific mind to look at it. Because I've tried to read the paper and I get lost in it, lost on what she's talking about. And not so much the Bigfoot world, because, I mean, you're dealing with, I hate to say this, but most people are uneducated. You have like these, quote unquote big names that are like, oh, it's all nonsense. She's a joke and blah, blah. And it's like, well, you finished high school.
Yeah.
So
It takes a little more training than that.
yeah. So what are you basing this off of? You didn't like the answer. You don't like her. And, but I could even see it with the science world if it comes out to where they don't like the answer. But you're right. The science is a science. I would love to have her on. I would love to have her explain, like dumb it down for me. My audience is smarter than I am, but at least dumb it down for me so I can understand where she's coming from, what she actually found. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to have her on to kind of explain it because I got a weird feeling in about 15, 20 years, people are going to look back and maybe have a different opinion of her, as far as what she found and what she, because she was a real scientist. I mean, you know what I mean? Prior to the whole Bigfoot world, she would be called into court as an expert witness. After Bigfoot, she probably couldn't get a job at Carl's Jr., or Burger King or anything.
I know.
It's
And,
a shame.
and I don't think most people probably don't realize that to be called in as an expert witness, it's not just obtaining, a doctoral degree. I mean, you have to have a degree of credibility and have done, work yourself in a particular area that is well respected, is peer reviewed, and you bring a certain gravitas to the courtroom to be able to be called as an expert witness. So they don't just call anybody as an expert witness, right? So that in itself should speak to her character and her way of conducting science and her reputation as a scientist. And then to suddenly say, oh, one paper later it's that's all on the trash heap. I mean,
Yeah.
that just isn't, it doesn't smell right.
No, I couldn't agree more, man.
I would be willing to bet there are other people who have samples and are doing work, and they probably replicated what she's done. She lays it out pretty well, and I maybe you'll get to talk to them at some point, but I just wouldn't be surprised if some curious academics out there, if they make the right connections, can get some interesting samples, and you're right. Over time, it might just become, a different assessment looking back on her work.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that you're in that type of line of work, as far as being scientific and having a scientific mind. And then on top of that, seeing something that shouldn't exist, you know what I mean? And you saw it when you were young.
Well, it influences. I think I'm just much more open-minded, because I know, I get ribbing, or I want to call it ridicule, because it's not, this is the first time I've actually ever, talked about it, maybe outside of a, dinner table or with friends, but, it makes you wonder about, what else is out there that we think we know about that we don't know about. So I think from a scientific perspective, to have that experience, whether it's with this topic or another one, is an invaluable experience that really informs how you look at the world, and what the limits too of your abilities are, right? I mean, because and this comes up a lot, I know, on your show about the everybody wants a body. If you knew, like, if the whole world knew how DNA worked and how the evidence worked, and you could confirm the chain of custody, so to speak, from the collection of the, whether it's hair or blood or skin or scat or whatever, and you came to this conclusion, people would not question it at all, right? But, I hate to say it, it comes down to if the gloves don't quit or don't fit, you must have quit kind of deal, where the DNA doesn't work, right? And so, that it's too sophisticated. And so, like you've said many times, there's demand from science and from other people for a specimen, for a body, and I know that elicits all kinds of emotions, and rightfully so. I mean, we don't know if we're dealing with an animal or a creature that's as sophisticated as we are, And so then that brings in all kinds of ethical and moral questions. But I mean, I also think, Wes, that I'm sure we're way past that. I mean, there's so many accounts when you look through the literature about, these things being killed either accidentally or on purpose. And then, the eventual disappearance, or someone absconds with the actual body. That, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there are bones and, evidence either within, governmental vaults or state vaults or wherever these types of materials are kept, that it's almost like we don't need to go out and shoot one. We just need to open the vault, right? I mean, the evidence
I would agree
has probably already been collected and confirmed. It's just that like we said, for whatever reason, we don't know why that's not something that's made public. So I mean, it's just such an interesting topic. And, to just say you saw one, and I was lucky to have that experience, I believe. And, it's really the tip of the iceberg. And it's, whether you're talking about the DNA science or you're talking about the need for a specimen, it's something that it belongs in the wheelhouse of science. But unfortunately, it hasn't been, I think, except with the exception of a few folks, been taken super seriously. And so, science is behind the times on this one, because the people that are experiencing it are, they're out in rural areas, or sometimes they're very close to urban areas, but they've had some type of experience and they've observed it, and they bring that back. And unfortunately, it can't be corroborated at this time with evidence, because the real deal seems to be extremely difficult to obtain.
No doubt. Wouldn't shock me if they had them in vaults somewhere. You're right about that.
I mean, I can't help but think in the Smithsonian, in the bowels and off the mall in Washington, that there are these gigantic femur bones and cranial bones and teeth, and because clearly we find everything from dinosaurs to giant sloths and mammoths that lived prior to the last ice age. That, I mean, if these creatures are flesh and blood, as so many viewers say, and most likely are, then they will leave eventually a fossil or biological material behind that can be categorized and studied. And the difference is it's just not available to the general public or the general scientific community.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me one bit, Jack, if they had bodies, body parts in a vault somewhere. And I think that these things have been killed many times over. It's just frustrating when it's hard to look for answers when there's a weird cover-up going on. You're not really sure why. But as far as your account goes, Jack, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your encounter and your thoughts on the matter. I really do appreciate you being here, man.
Very, very happy to help, Wes.
Well, I want to welcome to the show William. William, thanks for coming on, man.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. I know you're calling from Nova Scotia, and your encounter happened back in 2016. Kind of tell us about it. What were you doing, and what happened?
Yeah, so the encounter was May 3rd, 2016, and it wasn't in Nova Scotia. It was in Alberta. I worked in oil and gas during the time, and it was during breakup. My in-laws had come from Nova Scotia, and they just wanted to go travel. So we decided, okay, we're going to take a day trip to Jasper. So we went up there, and we had a beautiful warm spring. It was just very, very warm. We went fishing the night before, and just walking around town, there was elk and mule deer. Like, life was just exploding. And to kind of set up the tone for it, my father-in-law doesn't really like to stop and smell the roses. So like 7 a.m., he was like, all right, we have to get up and we have to go. We have to head back to Calgary. And so we kind of packed up, and we were heading out of Jasper, and he's speeding a long way ahead of us. And we're like, well, we kind of need to take some photos and just kind of relax for a second here. So we pull over, and there's like a look off. It's called the Athabasca look off. So we pull over, and the funny thing is when we pulled over, I noticed all the trash was kind of thrown out all over the place. And being Alberta, they have like the bear-proof trash containers. So I thought people were just kind of being lazy and whatnot. So I just kind of passed out without really thinking too much about it. So I park my minivan, and my oldest boy, Manny, and I get out, and we start walking because I wanted to get a nice photograph and just kind of stretch my legs. So it's about 9 a.m, and it's beautiful. It's already like 22, 23 degrees Celsius. The sun's rising, clear day, and we're looking over the mountain ranges towards British Columbia. And I decide, okay, well, I want to get a better shot, so I'm going to kind of go to like the edge where they've kind of clear cut it. And the way it's kind of like steps. So you have the look off, and there's the railing, but you can go down, and there's like one ledge and then another ledge. And at the ledge where it leads down to the forest floor, I'm standing there, and I'm kind of looking, and I'm like, all right, I have my phone in my hand, and I'm like, if I just kind of move like this, or I kind of move like this, I can get that beautiful mountain in the background without the trees in the way. And as I'm kind of trying to like maneuver my way to do this, I notice like I hear this loud pop and a snap, like a large trees being like broken. And I look it down at my 10 o'clock, and I'm just like, what the hell is a big man doing down there? And I'm looking, and I like, it's just like, you don't really comprehend. You're just seeing like, I didn't know really what I was looking at. You just see this black figure, right? And you just think, okay, there's like a big man. And what's kind of running through my head instantly is like, oh my God, like someone from like the Calgary Stampeders or an NBA player zipped up one of those skull hoodies like over their head, right? Because you kind of had the pointed conical head and the broadness of the shoulders and everything like that. So that's what's kind of going on in my head, like just through like milliseconds, because you're just trying to like assess it. I didn't know what I was looking at. And then just as it kind of like my eyes kind of like focus a little better, and I'm staring at it. Like it's just like you realize I saw its deltoid kind of flex, and like I looked in like the sunkenness of the eyes and everything, and I was like, oh my God, I knew what I was looking at. And so, anyways, at that point, I like literally just kind of lose it, and I turn around and I start whispering my wife's name. I'm like, come on, like look, type thing going on. And like really excitedly, but kind of half terrified at the same time. And I was just, I was just like, my mind's running a mile a minute. And I remember, oh my God, I got to go look back at this thing. And just as I looked back, I guess it smelt me or heard me or something. I just saw the tail end of it. And it's kind of funny. It was just like how Les Stroud described when he heard one running through the woods. It was just that bang, crash, smash, boom, and was just gone. So I'm like standing there, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And the people behind me with my wife are just kind of staring because they heard what was going on, but they couldn't see it. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I grabbed this big rock, and I just whiff it like as hard as I could. So hard the interior of my deltoid tore a little bit. And I just tore this big rock, and I just was waiting for it. So it's like crashing through. It was like bang, 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 bang. Nothing happened. So anyways, my son he booked it, and get in the car, and my wife's like, get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. And the kids can sense the tension, and they're crying, and she's like, what did you see? And I'm like, you're not going to believe this. Like, I saw Sasquatch, I saw Bigfoot. She's like, don't say that, don't say that. I was like, don't tell me what. And we're like snarling at each other because the tension's high, right? Like, she's like, stop scaring the kids, blah, 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 blah. And we're driving down the road, like, eventually, like, I just went into, like, it's like my focus and everything. I don't know, like, I was going through shock or something. So we pull over, and we eventually find Don's parents, and we pull over, and they're sitting on another look-off where there's a hospital, like a little wooden hospital, and I get out, and I throw up, and they I'm just like, they didn't see me do that or anything, but, we kind of go in and pretend like nothing happened. And it was just really strange because we're only like 3-4 kilometers down, maybe 5 kilometers down from where we saw it. And there was like, this yuppie warrior couple with their mountain clipping co-op gear having their like nice little like alpine adventure there. And just like, oh, how are you guys today? Like, did you see any wildlife? I was just like completely like, how are you? And I'm thinking like, this animal's still creeping around. Like it could pop out at any second. So I was all stressed out and, eventually I calmed down and everything enough. And we were driving. My wife says to me, we're out going to Calgary by Kananaskis. And she says, everybody heard whatever it was down there. And when they saw your face, you just terrified them. And she's like, did you throw a rock? I was like, yep, I did, Dawn. She's like, okay. And she's just like, well, don't ever ask me to bring this up again. And don't bring it up to anyone else because I don't want to talk about it. And we kind of just left it at that. And I kind of sat on it and didn't really tell anyone for a little bit, but I ended up calling the Hinton Wildlife Department and talked to a young fella and gave him my report. And he kind of just like, wow, like, we get a couple of these, but, I'll record it and whatnot. But he was like, I really don't know what's going on, you know what I mean, type thing. And I kind of left it at that. And then I was getting ready to go up to CNRL Horizon. We were doing a fly-in, fly-out, like just a shutdown at the big tar sands place up there. And I remember right like an hour before I left, I got a phone call from, it was a 613, so it was from Ottawa, and someone from their Natural Resources Canada called and just said, hey, is it Mr. Brown, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yes. And basically it's just like, you're not really crazy, but shut up and don't tell anyone. And just kind of like we preferred it, you didn't really speak of it too much. And like, there was more detail. We talked about it at length a little bit more, but that's basically how it was. And it was just, it was really kind of one of those shocking things because I really never, I like to entertain the fact of that, but I never in my wildest dreams actually imagined they really existed.
Did they say why? Why to be quiet about it?
No, they didn't. It was just kind of more like Canadian politeness. Don't rock the boat, I think. Like we've got this, there's tourists and stuff like that. And I suspect there's a lot of competing interest to that. But I'm the last person that wants to get to speculate on that kind of thing because, I don't know. Like the government at the time, I think they didn't want oil and gas exploration either out that way. So if they wanted to use that as an excuse, believe me, they would have jumped on it. But for the most part, I think it was primarily just, like, just don't rock the boat. Let's be polite about all this. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you. How far away from you was it, Will? And can you describe the face? Did it kind of look your direction?
Yeah, well, it was the distance. So I'm actually just at Grand Lake right now. So I'm looking. So I'm going to pinpoint. So I'm looking at a rock, and I'm going to say it's the same distance. So a little less than 100 feet at my 10 o'clock, and then down maybe 30 feet. So enough that I could, like, I there's no way I was mistaking it for a human or a bear or anything like that. It was a large. Like the face, I had sent you the like a picture, but it was more hominid. Like I guess the best word I could describe it is nilotic. And your listeners can kind of do their own research and kind of extrapolate what I mean by that.
What was the word, Will?
Nilotic. So it was basically, I've seen people. Like it's funny because I'll be out and about. And every once in a while, I'll see people, and I'll see specific features like the sunkenness of the eyes and things like that. And I'll be like, it will remind me of it. But it just looks like a primitive human, broader nostrils and sunken eyes and a conical head, right? And that's kind of like, that's what kind of stuck out to me because if I close my eyes and like just think of like the most basic shapes and everything of what I saw, it was like, like just kind of like triangle, like long, skinny rectangle for like an abdomen, like shoulders, broad shoulders, head sitting on shoulders, not much of a neck, kind of a weird smile on its face. And yeah, it's one of those things, you know, like I want to caution what I say, just because like I'm like, you know, I didn't see it for very long, and I don't want to say like this is exactly what I saw. It's just like I know it just looked like a primitive man, if you can imagine, with broader features and a conical head. Yeah, basically what everyone talks about.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. You got a chance to look at it.
Well, no, I got a good enough look at it, but I didn't process it. I didn't see it long enough to be like, oh, look at the flared nostrils and its teeth look, you know, almost horse-like. You know, like it was good. It was long enough to see like, okay, this is what it is, but to analyze it and kind of start like really searing it into my memory really deep, like it just, the adrenaline and everything starts pumping. And at that point, you're just kind of like, whoa, you know. But yeah, it's definitely, like I think we discussed before, like it's definitely like a relic hominid. You know, there's an ancientness about it, and it is funny. I do see occasionally, and I will see people that have its features, and it will just kind of give me pause, and I'm like, wow, you know, like those features have continued down the genetic lineage for, you know, like thousands of generations. Like wherever we split off from them, those features still are present. So I find that quite fascinating, and it's caused me to think about it an awful lot.
What do you think the creature was doing? Do you think it was already there and you just kind of ran into each other, or what do you think was going on?
I think it was there earlier in the morning, and it was definitely into the garbage can. And because the guy who called me from Ottawa had said, like, people had reported seeing it in the garbage and it had run off. Like, that's the guy from Ottawa from the 613 had told me about that. But it was definitely there, and that's what's so crazy is like it was literally just sitting in the tree line, just listening to all these tourists come up and, you know, take their photos and everything like that, and was just kind of hanging out. And that area was packed. I mean, Alberta, like Calgary, is a very young, like it's like Alberta, Calgary, Calgary, Edmonton, and Red Deer, that whole urban area. Like everyone has a big disposable income and is really active. So people go to the mountains, right? And, you know, Jasper's beautiful. And it's just like this park I'm at right now. Just there's people everywhere. And there's hiking trails a couple kilometers in from where I saw it. You know, so that's kind of like what really kind of sticks out about its elusiveness is like, you know, it was just kind of, it was around, but it was able to kind of just not really, like it was just, for some reason it decided it was there and it wanted to go to the garbage can. Oh, and I remember now, it did kind of look kind of like it had a rough winter. Like it didn't look as healthy as, you know, you think. Like we always think of like it's this big burly animal that's like, you know, king of the mountains and everything like that, and nothing can cause any harm to it. But this guy had a rough winter. His stomach was kind of distended, and you could just tell it wasn't going to be around too much longer. It maybe had a couple years left or something like that, or maybe it got the flu really bad or something, or cancer or something. It was hurting. That's one thing I do remember that much about it. It had seen better days.
Yeah, that's kind of a fascinating detail. You know, and I've heard some witnesses say that, you know, when they see it, it looks like it hadn't eaten in a while, looked a little rough, like it had been through, like you said, a couple of rough winters. What made you throw the rock? Was it just more or less like, get out of here? I wanted to see if it would respond. Because like I only saw for like 3 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. And I was like, oh my God, like, come on. Like, I'm terrified, but I'm still like, well, I'm not going to get this opportunity again, so maybe we'll throw the rock back, or maybe I'll hear it run again or something. I just wanted to engage with it again, which was probably a terrible idea.
It was a terrible idea to do that.
Yeah,
Like,
it didn't seem
they're
like
big
a lot.
animals.
No, I mean, I'm not breaking your balls. I was just kind of curious on why you throw the rock. You're like, get off my lawn, like you're yelling at kids on your lawn.
Get off, Mark! Yeah, like this thing. Yeah, no, they're yeah. It was just you just I don't like. I had my thumb on the part of the camera which was like, click, take photo now, take video now, and that was the last thing on my mind. I don't like. I kind of understand why people who see them, like why we don't have enormous amounts of video evidence. Like, I do understand that now, because it's just like you don't expect to see this. It's not supposed to be there. I mean, that's you just don't think, like,
Yeah.
all these people, all these armchair quarterbacks who are just like, I would have done this. And it's like, no, you wouldn't have. You would have cried like a little girl. Like don't give me that. Like,
Yeah.
this thing could have even sick. This thing could have like pulled my arms out. So, yeah.
Would you want to see another one?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. But I'd want to have like an M14 or something, or a shotgun with slugs. I mean,
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Other question I want to ask you. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's the other question I want to ask you. How big was it compared to you? I mean, I realized it wasn't, Arnold Schwarzenegger on steroids, but I mean, as far as tall and compared to you, how big was it?
It was definitely well over 8 feet tall. I know that much. Like and it was broad in the shoulders, but its arms were very long and lanky. I don't want to, like, the guy, when I remember I sent the email to the guy who sent me the email back from the Grand Cache Wildlife Department, he kind of bungled it all up, but it was over 8.5 feet tall, 8 feet tall, I don't know. And, it was muscular. Like, you could, it didn't have, like, even if it had 10% body fat, it had a mile. It was definitely, they're big animals. They're powerful. Like, they've got very large muscles. Like, they're healthy. Like, they're built to survive in a very rough environment, and their bodies definitely allow them to do that. Like, you can see, I remember the thing that really kind of clued me in that this wasn't a guy in a hoodie was a deltoid muscle. And you saw all those, like, striations, like because it had the tree in its hand and it just kind of put it down. But when it did that, you could see its deltoid was the size of a basketball, right? So it's like, okay, this is a big animal. It's big. It's big. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, I'm just confused again. Wes, we've talked about this before in our correspondence. Like, for these things to, it's just, there's a whole lot of unanswered questions. It's just like, how do these things like have breeding populations, and how does it survive in the mountains of Alberta or British Columbia and like survive just chewing on like fir boughs and, like eating like a dead, like mountain goat or something, or, you know what I mean? It's just like, there's just so many unanswered questions for me. It's just kind of, I'm fascinated by it, and I want to see another one, but I'm terrified to see another one, because it's a monster. You know what I mean? It's like, remember Beowulf? Beowulf?
Yeah, of course.
That 3D, and they had Grendel.
Yeah.
It's like that, right? It's like you walked into the woods and you saw that. It's just like, what the living hell? It's just, it's crazy. It brings you back to being a kid, right? Like, where you're like terrified. You're walking through the woods with your buddies, and you're like, oh my God, a Tyrannosaur is going to pop out any minute now. Except it's real. And you're just like, oh, great.
Yeah, they definitely shouldn't exist. I get where you're coming from. How do they survive? I'm like you. I have a million questions that doesn't seem to be any immediate answers to any of them. So it is fascinating that they run around. Out there in Canada too, there's a lot of people that see them in that area. There's a lot of famous cases from Jasper of encounters out there. Yeah, there's a lot of famous cases in Jasper of people running into these things. And you'd mentioned kind of a caveman or kind of a relic hominid. Is that kind of what you think that they are?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't I think, like, I come from a scientific family, so I want to give us an answer. But I think they're homogeneous. It's just by the eyes and the fact they're walking on two legs, right? But anything other than that, I mean, not everything. We don't have like the fossil record. Not everything dies next to like a stream bed and gets covered with silt, right? So for us to kind of nail down, oh, this is where it belongs and everything like that. I don't know if we're ever going to have any answers, but I firmly believe that they are closer to humans based on what I've seen than maybe what's depicted. Listening to your show, a lot of guys down south talk about ones that look like chimpanzees and stuff like that. So I think the ones up here, maybe they're just closer to that. Like just from my experience, right?
Yeah.
And they could be breeding with humans. Like I can't see why they couldn't have kidnapped people in the past and stuff. And on all this stuff like with missing 411 and everything like that, it just I started going down that route. I just stopped. I was like, I don't even want to go here. I'm like, nope. Now that I know they're out there, I'm like, no, I'm going to remain ignorant on all of this. I am just like, I'm going to just continue to live out here in Nova Scotia and go to the beach and eat fish and chips.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, and you bring up a good point. People can snicker at that, but down here in the States, Native Americans talk about that, and even your First Nation people up there in Canada talk about that.
We had a guy named Sonny. We was a driver, and he used to drive us from the frack because we were fracking. There's a big area there in Alberta, and I think it's between Rocky Mountain House and like Dawson's Creek, British Columbia. And he's a Cree boy there, and his name was Sonny. And I remember he kind of mentioned, he's like, oh yeah, they're around, type thing. I remember I brought it up with him after like I'd seen it, just kind of being like, what do you kind of think about this? And he was just kind of matter of fact. He didn't really know too much, but he was just like, oh yeah, they're around. Let's just leave them alone. Yeah, he kind of had that attitude, right? Like, like they're here. We don't know. We don't have some sort of like magical clairvoyance where we can read their minds any better than you type thing, right? But they're definitely in the, like, it's just, I think like, because the one thing that kind of goes unsaid is how much, like, we fracked the living hell out of like what can be described as their habitat. So if you go by like Fox Creek, White Court, Grand, like GP, Grand Cache, Hinton, it's just massive. I mean, you guys have big wilderness down where you are, Washington State, but northern Alberta and northern British Columbia, that's just a massive fertile, like, forested area. But if you look on Google Maps and you start looking at all the wells, all the frack pads and stuff like that, I'm quite sure that they're ticked off. And there's that video of one throwing a tree. And I'm almost certain that was either I can tell by the kind of like the soil, because you recognize it. It was either near Rocky Mountain House or by up northwest of Grand Prairie there, near an area called Raycroft, between Dawson's Creek and that area. And so they're definitely, because the oil and gas exploration there is like, was very intense. And they, like, there's large trucks running around and they're logging that area, and, it's loud and everything like that. And so I suspect they're probably not too thrilled with it. Like, I wouldn't be, like,
yeah.
And that's kind of like, I mean, you could do, if you were a graduate student and you kind of had a set on you, you might be able to get some money to kind of study the effects on the wildlife of fracking and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting, and there's so many unknowns, right? And I don't want to say like, like it kind of like, the one thing that kind of keeps me from kind of getting more involved with this is like, you kind of hear in the like the Sasquatch Bigfoot community, there's so many people who are kind of like, they argue over this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, look, we don't have a clue really what's going on here. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. I saw it for a little bit, and like, they're obviously living creatures who, live and die and suffer and have pleasure and all these things. And, and they're very comfortable in their environment. They must be.
Yeah.
To avoid like, to avoid man to this point and not have a specimen dragged in. Like it's at least that we know of. They must be pretty. They must know what they're doing. I mean, that much I know.
Yeah, no
I
doubt.
just don't know. And I don't want to say I know, because I like, again, it's a humbling experience, to say the least.
Yeah, it's very humbling. Very humbling. I don't know. Bigfoot community arguing, that must be a Canadian thing. Everyone seems to get along down here in America, so you guys need to work on that.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I guess so. It seems like to me, it seems like, it's one of those things where I can't quite figure out, like if these things are pretty predictable, and there's areas like, and I assume there are, where they're fairly common, and I can't see why, if you just you couldn't just bait them. Like man seems to have a pretty I don't want to say disastrous effect, but if you look at like crows, or you look at like raccoons, or you look at any of these animals that become adapted to like living next to people, like I can't see why a Sasquatch, if you put out a can of Coke or like a thing of like malt liquor or something like that, where you couldn't get one individual to just be like, F it, I'm just gonna get like, I really like I'm gonna like develop the same habits, like I like sugar, you know what I mean, like where's that sugar, you know what I mean, or something like that, to kind of flush one out. If you just like literally put a 2-liter thing of pop out in an area long enough, maybe one would be like, you know what, I don't care anymore, like I'm just gonna walk out in the middle of the day and grab one, if you really want to pull one out. Something like that, because I'm just confused how we, like, with all this research and everything like that, how we haven't really just been able to kind of coax one out. Because again, they're animals. They like high calorie foods.
Well, yeah, and there's I can give you a long answer to that, but there does seem to be some weird. They're not quite as tricked as you might think. It's harder to trick them than you think.
I guess not.
I was like, hell, put out some pot brownies and then I'll, a bag of chips, and I'll come back in about an hour and I'll track this thing down. But, then you think,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, then you think, do you really want, a 1,000-pound animal stoned out of his mind, going toe to toe with you? Probably not. You know what I mean?
It wouldn't be so. You know what? I was joking around with my buddy, and I was saying, you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if somewhere's on Vancouver Island, some like surfers or some hippies rolled some massive joint ones or something like that, just left it on like the park bench and went to go swimming or something, and the thing was watching them and took it off, and God only knows, like the world's a crazy place, and I like to kind of look at it like, through rose-colored glasses, and I like to kind of imagine like, you know what, if these things really are kind of watching us from a close distance and stuff like that, I'd like to see what kind of interactions, like the funny like interactions that have actually happened and stuff like that never get reported or no one really even knows about, Like I can only imagine if you wrote a book about like if you could actually really interview some people and stuff like that, and really kind of, because I imagine there's so many people I was reluctant to come on and talk. It took me a while to kind of want to do that.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you did. I'll tell you a funny story. One time I was talking to this guy from Kentucky. He's a moonshiner. And he had come out to his still, and this thing had been drinking out of his still. And he said he thought it was pretty much hammered when he got there. And he didn't know what it was. He had no clue what this thing was. And I guess it had been drinking out of his, drinking his moonshine. And
that thing would have been Jim Leahy drunk. That thing would have been blackout drunk.
You would think so. Those Kentucky boys know how to cook up that moonshine, man.
Like honestly, those are the entertaining things that that happen. And I like to think if you could collect stories like that, that would be hilarious. But oh my jeez, I don't think that's the kind of like habitual like behavior. Like if they're around humans, right, and they're around humans in like a fairly urban area. Like you imagine like if a Sasquatch like got too close to an IHOP dumpster. I mean, that thing would eventually just its cholesterol would be through the roof.
Type 3 diabetes.
it would just be like, remember that scene from The Simpsons where Homer had the helper monkey and was wearing a diaper?
Yeah, I do.
It'd be like, pray for Mojo. It'd be on the news. It's like, this large Sasquatch was found like with a swollen liver and stage 3 diabetes. Oh, this is good. Oh, it's good. I'm watching the bass boats now. They're all kind of coming in here.
Yeah.
We're going to get a good weight. What other questions do you have, bud? Like, I'd love to answer them, but I don't know.
No. That's it, man. You go enjoy the bass fishing. I wish I'd love to swap places with you, but
I can't believe about the lockdown, bud. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You better be wearing a mask. By the way. Oh no, you're Canadian. You're probably okay.
Everyone's just like here in Nova Scotia. Everyone's just like, what coronavirus? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're all at the beaches and just doing our thing. But
sounds nice.
Yeah, I hope everything's going well out where you are. Come on out and visit us sometimes. It's beautiful here.
Oh, I'll have to.
I don't think we have any Sasquatch. New Brunswick, guaranteed.
Yeah.
But here, I don't know. But keep in touch.
I will.
If there's any other questions or...
No other questions, Will. Enjoy your time out there in Nova Scotia. I hope you have a great time. And thank you again for coming on.
Well, no, thank you very much for, talking to me throughout this time and kind of let me know I'm not crazy. That was awesome.
You take care.
All right, cheery bye.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
My wheels unturned to go alone. Baby, you should know that I'm gone. With the lights on, this is my home, place where I own memories of you, dear. Hunting your eyes, close at the skies, I'll mesmerize memories of you, dear. I saw moon as a human and writer, and its power grew wider. So I put my speed a little wiser, turned to instant thinner, quieter. With the lights on.